Welcome back to A Musician and a Filmmaker, the podcast where we talk about albums and movies. And this week, we're talking about Michael Clayton, the super cool thriller from 2007 with George Clooney, where he plays an abject loser. But because he's George Clooney, he's still really fucking cool. And it's framed like this. That's why I'm doing this gag. Leave a comment below if this is uncomfortable for you to look at.
It's uncomfortable for me.
Okay, well, I'll fix that. Whoop. Here we go.
There we go. All
Welcome
right.
back.
So,
Here we are.
yeah, welcome. We're talking about Michael Clayton. You know him from the name of the movie from 2007, which is was a good year for things, art, entertainment. We got Tegan and
Not the
Sarah's
economy.
Con. Not the they put the con in economy.
Oh, snap. That would be The Big Short, which we're not talking about, which is a
No.
great movie, but it's actually funny to think, like, all of this is happening, and then, like, in the background, the housing market is about to crash, but that's just not what this movie is about at all. That would be Michael Clayton, too, if George Clooney was in The Big Short.
Yeah. Interesting.
You know.
In an alternate universe.
You had never seen this movie, and the only reason I recommended it is because it's a Tony Gilroy movie, and Tony Gilroy is currently everyone's favorite writer because he's the mastermind behind the
Star
Disney
Wars.
Plus series Andor. Specifically Andor. He also wrote the Bourne trilogy, Bourne Identity, Supremacy, and Ultimatum, and then he wrote and directed the Bourne Legacy, which nobody remembers or likes.
Nobody
And
saw it even, I don't think.
That was the only one I saw, actually, for years. I hadn't seen the original trilogy. I saw the Jeremy Renner movie, and I was like, what the fuck is going on?
What?
I know. Well, it was just because it was a friend of mine I'd known since we were like 7. And it was just like one of those things where I finally had a driver's license and I wanted to go, drive the 40 minutes that I'd moved away to go hang out with him. And we just wanted to see a movie. And it was like, all right, well, the Bourne Legacy action movie. It'll be interesting. And it's mostly just people being like, where's Jeremy Renner? And then they cut to Jeremy Renner and he's like, I need drugs. But you know what? I'm not going to blame that on Tony Gilroy.
They call him Jeremy Renner in the movie.
Yes.
He's not even Jason Bourne.
No, I don't remember what his name was in the movie. But they were trying to... It's actually interesting that came out, and then he was in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol the year before. And both of them were like, okay, he's taking over the Bourne franchise, and then they were like, Tom Cruise is going to do the 5th one, and then he's going to hand it over to Jeremy Renner to take the lead. And that did not happen. Instead,
so
Jeremy
weird.
Renner got ran over by his own snowplow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. But that was years later. He's fine now. He's fine. That's why we can make jokes about it. But
Talk about getting plowed, huh?
let's talk about Michael Clayton instead, who gets plowed a few times in this movie.
Absolutely.
He gets conned. This whole thing is a huge con in a way. So Michael Clayton, it's a movie about a guy named Michael Clayton.
Michael Clayton.
He is a lawyer, but he's not a trial lawyer. If anything, he's just a bagman for a large law firm that
He's
is
a fixer.
representing. He's a fixer, a janitor, as he calls himself. Not a Reddit moderator, but a janitor nonetheless. And his whole thing is that he just basically does the dirty work that other people don't want to do because some circumstance or another ended up him there. But he even has a whole thing where he talks with his boss about how, like, he is capable of being a trial lawyer. It's just so are hundreds of other people that work at that firm. Like, when you're at that big of a firm, you kind of take what you're given. And he's given this position of, I gotta fix stuff if there's a problem. So, like, the first example they show is this guy, like, he goes to this guy's house who had just run over a stranger because it was like rainy and foggy and the roads were slick and the guy was running in the dark without any reflective clothing, yada, yada, yada. But George gives him basically this whole speech where he's like, look, I'm not here to be a miracle worker. I'm here to help you practically get things done and keep it on the down low. Like, that's how this works. I'm not going to just wave a magic wand and everything you didn't happen. Although you can argue that he does that a few times, or at least attempts to, through the connection of his brother, who is a police detective. But the main plot of the movie is he is sent to help fix a situation with the lead defense attorney for this agricultural conglomerate U-North, who is the defendant in a class action lawsuit because a weed killer that they had sold to farmers was leaking into well water and giving people cancer. So that's not good. And
No.
so if that happens to you, and especially if it happens to at least 468 named victims, then yeah, it's going to be a pretty big deal. And so it's basically like if they lose the lawsuit, the corporation goes under, essentially. So all this to say that the reason that George Clooney that Michael Clayton has to fix this situation is because the lead defense attorney has a nervous breakdown or mental episode or whatever you want to call it in the middle of a deposition, and he starts stripping off his clothes and like follows this girl that they're deposing out into the parking lot, even though it's like frozen and covered in snow outside in the middle of Wisconsin, wherever they are. And so George Clooney bails him out of jail, and it's really this kind of like give and take between him and the guy who he's trying to like keep on the right track, but then also there are bigger forces at play that are sort of stacked against them. And it becomes this whole thing of like, you know, like who is watching who's being surveilled, who isn't, you know, like who knows what they shouldn't know. And it's like who is being used by the corporation to solve a problem and then be stamped out, which is apparently how they operate. And so Arthur is the name of the lead defense attorney who is, you know, being hailed as crazy, in which, okay, he is, but he's also right, because his arc is that he goes from prosecuting this case for 6 years, defending this case. They said it was like hundreds of depositions and like just a giant case, way bigger than most class action cases ever get. Like it's ridiculous how long it's gone on, and the guy he loses it. His brain just like snaps because he eventually realizes, oh, we are at fault. And we have admitted that we are at fault for killing these people. And they have this memo from like the 90s that definitively proves that. And he has it. And he could very easily leak it. And he intends to. However, Tilda Swinton plays a character who is essentially a fixer for the corporation side of it, in a way. She's like, I don't know, she's like the number 2 or 3 at the company. She's like really important for this conglomerate. And so she basically takes it upon herself to do what she can to either get this guy to, you know, straighten up or silence him, which is what she does. She hires hitmen to kill him. And spoiler. Well, you know what? We're gonna spoil it no matter what. It's
you know that now after the spoiler.
Yeah. So it becomes a really just like a more. The reason it's called Michael Clayton is because he's sort of the one caught in the middle of all of it. He's trying to keep Arthur safe, but at the same time, he's also trying to save his own skin because he has this whole subplot where him and his brother went in together on a restaurant. It didn't work out because either the brother embezzled the money so that he could buy a bunch of drugs, or the restaurant failed in general, or both. But either way, he's broke and he's trying to like basically pay off the debt that he has incurred from borrowing money from like loan sharks, essentially, to fund this restaurant that failed. And so he's essentially trying to figure out how to solve that. He's figuring out how to solve like 5 different things at once. Not one of them is his failed marriage and the fact that he has a
terrible relationship with his kid.
Yeah, but it's there's a lot kind of just packed into one movie, and it's a very solid, engaging thriller, even though it's mostly people talking, and there's like maybe 1 or 2 action sequences, one of which I feel like is almost superfluous by the end of it. But that's what's so great about it, is that like it didn't even need that. It was like thrilling enough just based on the like the specificity of the plot and like all the different factors at play. Yeah, it's a great movie. So thanks for watching. Jordan doesn't get to say anything about it. We're done. We'll see you next month. No, but there's a lot to explain there, so I had to dump all of that.
No, I agree, and it is a layered film in a lot of ways. Like I think that you're right. Like it's engaged, and it's funny because it is so engaging, and coming right out of the Bourne trilogy. It's like
literally.
You're thinking.
He said he turned in his script for the Bourne Ultimatum, and then like a week or 2 later went into pre-production on Michael Clayton,
which is nuts because it's funny because it's like it's taken me a long time obviously to see it, but for a movie that is not a Bourne movie, that is not just fucking nonstop action. There's like hardly any action in this movie, but it still manages to engage the entire time. And I think it really comes down to like what you said, the fact that there's so many kind of like angles that are happening simultaneously here. But also, I think really it's the performances. You know, like everyone delivers such and it's not just that they do a good job at making a believable performance, but like the characters also feel believable too. I think like the characters have so many sides to them that it's like, even if it's in this world that you have nothing to do with, you're like, I can see that guy existing, you know? And R.I.P. Tom Wilkinson, man, that guy.
Within like the last year, right?
Yeah.
A year or two.
I mean, he just like, he was a phenomenal actor, but you know, I hadn't seen this one until just this week, and I gotta say, this is probably like one of his best performances.
Well, I think most people would agree because he got an Academy Award nomination. Tilda
Well, there was
Swinton
a lot. Yeah,
won an Oscar for
Yeah.
her role in this, which is surprising because she's really kind of a small percentage of the movie.
Yeah, I you know what, like
But it
Tilda
works.
Swinton, she's good in general. You know, nothing bad to say about her, even though some of the movies that she ends up in are shitty. Like,
Name
great.
one.
The one about the genie with the guy who raw dogs on airplanes. You know what
I
I'm
have
talking
no
about?
idea what the hell you're talking about.
Okay, so
What?
the guy that I'll break it down. You know about raw dogging on airplanes?
Is that when you take off your shoes and socks and walk around, or you have
No.
like, are you talking about like a Mile High Club kind of thing?
No, so that's what I had thought it was at first, because I was already familiar with the term raw dogging in a sexual, you know, definition, but turns out raw dogging on airplanes is a new trend that people are doing, where they don't fucking do anything on the airplane. They just sit there and stare at the back of the seat in front of them for however long the flight is. And it started, Idris Elba was the guy.
Oh, Idris Elba does that?
Apparently, it started from from this meme.
This explains
where, like,
a lot more about how how he ended up in that Gold documentary. He's just like an NPC who's really good at acting.
Yeah, just sits there. Doesn't, you know? You don't go to the bathroom. You can't.
Maybe it's just like meditation.
You can't go to sleep. You can't turn on the TV in front of you. You can't listen to music. You can't talk to the person beside you. You just fucking sit there and stare at the back of the seat from the moment the flight starts to the moment you fucking land. So anyway, that's raw dogging. Idris Elba
And Tilda Swinton was in a movie about this?
No, it has nothing to do with the movie. My association with who Idris Elba is now so cemented in the raw dogging lore that I can't separate it. So Idris Elba was in a movie.
I've never even seen this meme, so I would never have thought to introduce him like that.
Well, look it up.
I would have just called him Idris Elba.
Anywho, he's in a movie that was made by the fucking guy that did the Mad Max movies.
George Miller.
And it's Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba, and he plays a genie, and she awakens him. I forget what it's called. It came out like 2 years ago. It's fucking terrible. Terrible movie. Awful.
Are you sure this is a real movie?
It's a real movie. I watched it. I watched it in 2 sittings, because the first time I had to turn it off because I was just like, I hate this movie. And then I was like, the completionist in me wouldn't let me just live my life without finishing it, so I had to finish it.
3,000 Years of Longing?
That's the one.
Oh, I
That's
remember
the one.
seeing the poster for this. It's about a genie?
Yep.
I thought
Idris
it was
Elba
like
plays
some,
the
like,
genie.
I thought it was like some sort of like Doctor Strange wizard thing, because she is in Doctor Strange. She
Yeah, that's
plays
true.
like a
She's-
wizard, for lack of a better term.
bald wizard. But anyway, that's a bad movie that Tilda Swinton's in.
So one movie out of her whole career.
There's others, I'm sure.
Name me
She's
another
been in so
bad
many.
Tilda Swinton movie.
Was she in the Bong Joon-ho one about the pig? That was a bad movie.
Hey, that is not a bad movie. Oakjaw is a great movie. Okay? It's a little
agree to disagree.
save the earth, you know. But I mean, come on.
She was really irritating in Snowpiercer, but that was intentional.
That
and
was
I do
by
give her props,
design.
yeah, for that.
Well, isn't she also really irritating in Oakjaw, or am I thinking of Jake Gyllenhaal's character?
Jake Gyllenhaal was so irritating in that movie. I did not like
liked
that
it.
movie.
I like that movie. I guess we're
like-
going to talk about it on the podcast.
I love Bong Joon-ho and all of his movies that I've seen.
Hey, you know what? I liked
are great,
Oakjaw
but-
more than Mickey 17.
I
At
haven't
least
seen
Oakjaw
Mickey 17.
didn't have a concept that it didn't follow through on.
Well, don't say anything about Mickey 17 because I haven't seen it yet. But I mean, is Okja better than like Parasite or Mother
not.
or Barking Dogs
Obviously
Never Bite?
not. It's still a good movie, okay? Just because it's not the best fucking movie he's ever made doesn't make it bad. Come on.
It's bad.
Fuck you.
You set a standard, you stick to it, all right? And your name's Bong. Come on.
Tilda Swinton is a great actress.
She's good.
And
She's
the
great.
fact
She's
that
great.
this is the one movie she won for is a little weird because it's like...
Yeah, it is weird. It feels like
she's
it's one of those...
played so much bigger characters before.
Yeah.
She's
it feels
very,
like it's that
reserved.
Leonardo DiCaprio situation where it's like they gave it to him for The Revenant, where it's just like, it was good, but like there have been so many others where it's like way
Even
better.
Wolf of Wall Street he could have won for.
Totally.
I think he could have won for The Aviator personally, but I don't think the world was ready.
Yeah, I don't think the world was ready either. But that was exactly. It's like if you look at
she also
those,
doesn't have a crutch like he does, which is screaming. So she's pretty versatile in terms of...
She's more versatile as well.
She is able to blend into what the movie requires. And she's really good in this, even though, she has a very minimal role. And I got to say, if you're a fan of Tilda Swinton in a very unattractive bra, this is the movie for you, because you get a full 5 minutes of her in the mirror in her bra. And it's so bland. And I think that's the point, is that her character is just so, like, she is just a corporate, like, cog in the... Or not a cog in the wheel, but she is, like, one of the gears that keeps the machine moving, and that's her purpose. And so she takes it upon herself to go outside the realm of legality to solve problems that have arisen in this years-long process of trying to settle this lawsuit. So yeah, it's interesting how her character is very clearly out of her element. And it almost makes you wonder, did she just fail upwards because she's like a sociopath that was just able to memorize stuff?
Probably.
I mean, I guess if you're going to be number 2 at a major corporation, you have to be anyway, right?
Yeah, well, number 2, as they say, that is another term for shit.
That's the first time we see her is on the toilet.
That's true.
She sniffs her armpit because she's got all that sweat.
She's got sweaty armpits.
Yeah, so if you're a fan of Tilda Swinton and sweaty armpit fetish, this is the movie for you.
You know what, though? I'll bet you somebody out there has beat it to that. I mean, just, numbers game.
That's all I'll say about that.
There's like a real life class action lawsuit that was against, like, I think Ford for
DuPont.
Okay, yes. And
if we're talking about the same thing.
Well, yeah, it was all these cars that were like had some faulty aspect to them, and a number of people died, and it actually made more sense for the corporation to buy off, to settle, monetarily with those people that had the incidents than to actually recall the cars, which is a really interesting kind of real life situation where you can kind of really see this weird moral compromise, like scenario where it's like...
Except that went a different way, right? Because that guy realized that DuPont was in the wrong, left, and then actually ended up suing them. Like he switched from defense to prosecution and won. so fuck you, DuPont.
But it's interesting regardless to see that that's what the company strategy is, though, right? Like,
wasn't it specifically the Pinto hatchback?
That was what it was. Yeah, it was the Pinto. Yeah,
because that was the one where if you like rear-ended it, it would just like explode. Because that's like right where the gas tank was.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy. It's a horrible design flaw, but I
think they even reference all that in Fight Club without naming who it is. Right? That's like the whole. That's like what. That is Edward Norton's job in that movie. At the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He's like a claims adjuster or something like that.
Yeah, but yeah, it's interesting to think of it like in a real world thing like that, because I think like maybe some people might watch it and be like, well, you know what, they wouldn't try and cover up stuff like this. All these people dying, getting cancer from the weed killer, and like it's like no.
I think they absolutely would. They would just be a lot less sloppy about it. Of course, like Tilda Swinton.
Of course they would. And that's the thing, is it's based on reality. But yeah, no, I really I did enjoy it. I think
there's all these Netflix documentaries that George Clooney has produced specifically about how corporations do shady shit to try to hide the negative things that they've done.
Are these documentaries in existence because of the fact that he was in this movie? Did that like spark like some sort of activism
I think that's
on
just
his part?
Who he is. I think he's always been like aware like that. Now, remind me, isn't his wife Iranian, or like there was something with his wife with the Israel-Palestine?
That does sound familiar. Yeah, I don't know too much.
So we're not going to get into that.
Yeah.
So maybe he's not 100%. We all know George Clooney's not the best guy on earth. I mean, come on. Like, he can sit here and spew all of this, like, you know, progressive politics stuff, but then he turns around and, like, cheats on his wife with other actresses. And it's like, okay, I don't know what you want from me, George Clooney. Am I supposed to just be cool with everything that you're doing? Like,
but that also leads into the movie, because there is that moral compass thing where it's a constant of what, you know, you should be doing versus what you're being asked to do. That's the major core of the message of the movie, I would say.
Yeah. And it's also like you can draw parallels between George Clooney and Tilda Swinton's characters. Because they essentially serve the same role, just like she works for the company, he works for the law firm defending the company. Which makes me wonder, I guess we're going to spoil the ending. Tom Wilkinson, who plays Arthur, who is the guy that goes crazy, he starts to realize that his phones are being tapped because at some point before this, he is calling the woman that he sexually harassed, for lack of a better phrase, in that deposition, and he's doing it on the record. Like, people can find this out, you know, and like they can open themselves up to their own lawsuit for like legal malpractice and all this stuff. So it's horrible for the company that he's doing this. And so they find out that he's been calling them, and then they bug his house, or they've already bugged him because they don't trust him. But because of a result of that recording, Michael Clayton is told about it and then confronts Arthur about it. And Arthur's like, how the fuck do you know who I called? Like, and so he immediately puts it together that his house has been bugged. And so he starts playing the music for the, like, you know, we are you, North. We're here to save the planet, like, type of commercials, like, bullshit that they put out. And he starts shouting, like, reading the memo that he's gonna, like, mass produce and distribute so that people know that you, North, is actually at fault. Because he knows he's being recorded, so he's just like, hey, come and get me, motherfuckers. Like, I know everything you know at this point. So, like, of course, that's a mistake, because then they end up euthanizing him in the very most, like, methodical way I've ever seen someone murdered in a movie before. It's, like, very cold and clinical, and it's like this movie doesn't try to, like, make it cool.
It's unceremonious.
Just, like, it's very matter of fact, like, this is what happens. They went in, they sprayed a thing, he overdosed. You know, they set it up to look like a suicide, they leave. Yeah. And that's it. And you're, the whole time you're just like, God damn, man.
Yeah.
Like, it just happens like that too. Like, the movie doesn't really build up to that moment. Like, you know he's being bugged, but like it just kind of cuts to him walking out of his front door, and then they like tase him and spray him, and then that's it. Within like 60 seconds he's dead. And you're just, I think
it's definitely intentional. I mean, like the murder plots are so cold and calculated that they feel like there is just no emotion, like from, you know, like from the side of the perpetrators. It's like just the same with, like, this movie starts with, I think, such a fantastic opening, not knowing, you know, that you're going to go back in time and then see how this car bomb thing played out. But it's just like,
well, George Clooney is driving along a back road. He sees these horses up on a hill. He stops his car. He gets out. He walks up the hill. He walks up to the horses. And, you know, he has like this sort of moment, which we'll get into the theme of that later, how that all ties together. And then the car explodes behind him in the background. And he's just like...
Yeah.
And then it cuts to 4 days earlier.
Yeah, it would be like, you know, if he did blow up in the car, again, it'd be this super unceremonious thing, especially if this is, you know, where your whole story is leading to. And it's just, yeah, it feels pretty realistic in the sense that, like, when things need to be suppressed for the greater good, they're not going to make it a big thing. Like, they're just slip in, slip out, you know? Like, what is the cleanest way to just
it's also,
solve this problem in their mind's eye?
It shows how, like, they're, kind of like it draws another parallel to they are their own fixers.
Yeah.
You know, they're just, there's different degrees of who is serving what purpose for the ultimate, like, pyramid of power in this whole corporate web. So let's get to the ending, because this is
Well,
how
okay,
the
yeah.
whole thing ties together. And we really can't talk about the movie without talking about the last scene, which is just like, it's just one of those scenes where you watch it and you're like, yes!
Yeah.
Even though it's just like two
super
people
satisfying.
talking in a room.
Super satisfying.
So the
I
car
mean-
bomb goes off.
Yeah.
He's not in it. And then he just like throws all of his personal belongings in the car to make it look like he did die. And so that he can just be like, you know, off the radar, so that he can go to his brother, who throughout the movie helps him with like, okay, his brother helps him bail out Arthur from the jail. His brother helps him get a fake police seal for Arthur's apartment after the murder, and he's trying to go in, and that's where he finds the memo and slips it in his pocket, he finds the receipt for the copy shop where like the 3,000 copies of it.
3,000 copies, yeah.
And then he just goes and grabs one of them, basically. So while that happens, and then his brother convinces the cops not to press charges when the cops burst in, and then he's like, well, who called 911? There was no one around. And you find out that the hitman called 911. The fact that no one knew that he had a brother who was a cop is part of the sloppiness of their whole plan, because they're not really thinking about it. They're thinking the settlement's coming up like the end of this week. Like, we really need this to go perfectly so that all these people don't lose their jobs and the company implodes and all that. So they're just like, whatever distractions in our way, we're just gonna like a mosquito, we're going to swat it and kill it and then move on with our lives. But they don't realize that Michael Clayton is smarter than that. And luckily he wasn't in the car when it blew up, otherwise he'd be dead. So he goes to his brother, but we don't know this. All we know is that the car blows up, he disappears. His brother-in-law, I think, like his ex-wife's brother, who's like the guy that he went in with the restaurant on and is like this fuck up. He's the one that like picks him up from the bus stop or wherever. And then the next time we see him, he's in the like lobby of this hotel where they're having this meeting with the shareholders, that like the CEO of the company, who signed off on the memo saying our chemicals give people cancer, by the way. So that's the whole reason this thing is such a big deal, is because it implicates everyone and destroys any case that they had at defending themselves. And so he shows up, and like she walks out to take a phone call or something after giving her little presentation. He's like, hey, how's it going? And she's just like she literally looks like she's seen a ghost.
Yeah.
Because to her, she is like, and he even jokes. He's like, hey, Arthur's walking around here somewhere. You want me to find him? And then he just goes into this whole thing where he's like, you know, I know everything. And she's like, what do you want? He's like, I want millions of dollars to keep quiet. And she's like, okay. He's like, but, and then like, he gets her to repeat what she is agreeing to out loud, because he's recording her on his little phone in his jacket pocket. And essentially she implicates herself not only in accepting a bribe, but also admitting that she ordered to have Arthur murdered, and him, even though it didn't succeed the second time. And she just like collapses. Like she doesn't know she literally just like her brain breaks and she just like falls over as he's walking away. And it's just such a like satisfying moment. Like we can't really describe how great that scene is. You just have to watch the movie and get all the way to the end. Yeah. Because I feel like if you were on the fence about liking this movie or not, by the time it gets to that ending, I feel like you have to know like, oh shit, okay, that's where all this was heading. That's amazing. Like, you know what? It really does show that Tony Gilroy all of those Gilroy brothers are in like show business together. Like one of their brothers edits. Dan is like, he made Nightcrawler and a couple other movies, I think. I think he co-wrote Born Legacy, but I could be wrong on that. But either way, Tony Gilroy was working on this script for like 10 years. Like did you know he wrote Armageddon, Jordan?
Yeah.
I didn't know that till I looked it up.
Well, it was an adaptation, right? I think it was based on something else. A
Probably.
book or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But he wrote the screenplay for the Michael Bay movie. And so that was around the time he had the idea. And I think that's probably when the DuPont stuff was happening, was like the late 90s.
Makes sense.
And so it just took a while for him to actually convince people to give him the like, I don't know, this movie only costs like $25 million. It's like a pretty cheap movie.
Yeah.
Which is understandable, because it's like, it is just people mostly talking in rooms, which is cheap to do. It's just you have to pay your mega
your A-list celebs,
movie star. Which he did end up crediting George Lucas. He ended up crediting George Clooney for being the reason that this movie ended up getting made. It was like the second he was attached, everyone's like, oh, George Clooney wants to do a movie about an evil corporation. All right. You know, like you're not really going to get people to say no. And apparently this script was so good and it had been passed around for so long that like 3 other directors were trying to get their hands on it to direct it, to like take the credit and make the movie. But Tony's like, nope, sorry. It's too good, and I want to direct this. I want this to be my directorial debut. And he pulled it off, and it's really good. And what's interesting is that one of the people who wanted to direct the movie is in the movie as his boss. Marty is played by Sidney Pollack, who is a movie director,
right.
and I think he was also an actor here and there. So he wanted to direct the movie, and Tony said no. Steven Soderbergh wanted to direct the movie. Tony said no. And then there was another guy whose name I'm forgetting right now. I think Anthony Minghella or something like that. Another Academy Award winning director, I believe. So they all ended up being executive producers on the movie, including Sidney Pollack, who was both in it and as a producer, because they knew it was too good of an idea to not be made. And it's really good that it did. And it got like a bunch of, it got all the major Oscar nominations. This is one of the few movies that has like more than 2 acting nominations. George got nominated, Tom Wilkinson, and Idris Elba. No, Tilda Swinton. And of course they best screenplay was nominated, best director, best picture, yada yada yada. So it was widely acclaimed. Everyone really likes it. And then the next year Iron Man came out, and Hollywood changed, and the $30 million mid-budget drama disappeared overnight, and they barely exist anymore. So it's nice to be able to go back to this and be like, man, remember when they used to make movies and not just theme park attractions disguised as movies?
You know, it's
like
funny.
there's obviously still exceptions nowadays, like with A24 and you know, Neon and whatnot.
Not really. I mean, like, at least on a...
Not starring George Clooney.
No, it's a different scale. Like, it's a whole different field, really, because I was thinking about that, too, when I was watching it. I was like, remember movies like Aaron Brockovich and, like, The Pelican Brief? It's like, hey,
Speaking of Soderbergh.
You don't see movies like that anymore. And I was like, this is 2007, so yeah, it's a long time ago now. But like, I was like, it was refreshing to see something like that because you don't see it anymore. But it's funny though, because I think it's like those movies took a back seat because people crave that in your face, action experience rather than a movie that you maybe have some thoughts about and stuff.
Even in 07, this was seen as like a 70s throwback kind of style, which makes sense because I didn't realize that in 2025, Tony Gilroy is 68 years old. He was 50 when he made this movie, meaning he grew up in the 70s watching 70s movies like The Conversation and
so that makes sense.
There was another one that they referenced specifically, The Parallax View.
So I in my notes here, I was also writing that I feel like there's something to be said about Arthur's manic episodes and his struggle with mental illness and its sort of intersection with his moral awakening. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they do point out that like he had lost his wife due to sickness, and then the daughter was also having a lot of mental health issues. So it seems like maybe this was sort of a genetic thing that he had been dealing with his whole life. It's just he was able to sort of get past it and focus on the work. But because this one case, he spells it out. He's like, I've spent 12% of my life on this case. And it's just like, when you put it like that, it's like, shit, 6 years for a 60-year-old? Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah, it's just, it completely consumed him. And the fact that I feel like if I were put in a similar situation, I would probably have a nervous breakdown too, realizing that I had spent years of my life trying to defend a corporation who is demonstrably at fault and killed these people. But because like of the power of high cost attorneys in the corporate world, the way that they're able to manipulate the justice system to like, this should be an open and shut thing where you just say, you know what, yes, we are going to close down and pay all these people off, or not pay them off, but like give them the money that they deserve for having lost their loved ones. But no, they decide instead to defend themselves. And it's like, okay, well, obviously you're just fucking evil then, because it's like, ultimately, like it's like the same thing with Tegan and Sarah, right? Where they can't just quit being a band because someone is pretending to be them. It's like, well, what they have is a business that operates around them. So it's like, if they go away, that means like 15 other people lose their livelihoods,
Did you know, Greg, actually, that one of the first Tegan and Sarah albums is called
The Business of Art. This Business of Art.
How about that?
I like it because that's a play on this business of ours, like they say in the mafia. Disting of ours. Disting of arts.
But what I was going to say about the mental health thing is I was thinking like it's kind of interesting, way of sort of showing that if you are, going against the stream, you're effectively crazy,
Right. Well, and then it's an easy scapegoat. Mm-hmm. Like especially even when it gets down to like, they faked his suicide, and apparently before that happened, he had called. In fact, that's probably where he was headed when he walked out of the door of his apartment when he got killed, was probably going to the airport to pick up the girl who not only had he made amends with her, but then he was like, he had paid a first class ticket to fly her out from Wisconsin to New York just so that he can meet up and show her the memo and prove that Hugh North was at fault. But then he got killed before he could do that. So the mom of the girl calls George Clooney, Michael Clayton, and is like upset. And he's like, whoa, what the fuck? What are you talking about? And so he goes and he meets her at like the airport hotel, and they have this whole conversation about, the fallout of all this. And she's like, he really was crazy, huh? And it's just like, even after all that, because she doesn't know, she can't know because it's just too sensitive of information for one out of like 500 representatives in this case to know, because you just don't do that. It's one thing if you're a lawyer working for the firm to know this information, but even then he wasn't supposed to know that. So she definitely isn't supposed to know that,
Yeah.
So he just kind of has to be like, yeah, I guess. But it's like, he knows that like, yes, he is crazy, but he is right.
Yeah.
You can be both. And, but no one is willing to, no one understands that nuance. It's either you're crazy or you're right.
No, I think it's handled really well, and it's so funny because even like when the movie starts and you're just hearing like his kind of ramblings, and he's talking about like being covered in this like afterbirth and stuff. And it's like, it was like he was talking about
the way he describes it is it's like something that's like inside him, like infecting him from the inside out.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where the taking off of the clothes kind of is like, even if I ripped off my skin, it wouldn't get rid of this thing inside me that is like eating me away.
Exactly. And it's like, that's actually a rational thing that's happening on the inside, but externalized appears to be batshit crazy. And
it's not even that. It's just like, it's just not appropriate for what is happening in the real world at that moment.
Yeah.
Like the circumstance that they're in is going completely against those odds. So that's why everything happens, because they just want to solve the problem. They don't give a shit about him. They give a shit about the fact that he's the attorney that they're relying on to save their ass.
Of course.
He wants to do the exact opposite. So it's just,
but it is also very kind of, I don't know, poetic, I guess, in a way that he's talking about this stuff that seems like crazy ramblings when it's really kind of just describing like the birth of this, sense of morality inside of him, which I think is pretty interesting, because I think the whole movie also revolves around themes that have to do with like identity and self-discovery.
There's a major theme of like every man for himself.
Yes.
Which I think they do a really good job of making like a symbolic representation of that with what is it called? It's like
the
Conquer
book
and Divide. What
it's,
was the name of
Reign and Realm and Conquest.
Realm and Conquest. Yeah, is the name of the book that
Henry
Michael Clayton Jr. Oh, okay. I don't remember the son's name.
Henry Clayton.
Henry Clayton is reading.
Yep.
And at some point he calls his dad, but then Arthur picks up, and then he just explains it all to Arthur, and Arthur's just like,
he's super into
it. Yes. Like it's like, it's almost speaking to him. And the symbolism I'm talking about is the fact that both the cover of this book and the cover of the memo that he was making copies of have a red cover. And the way that Henry describes the plot of the book, it almost directly parallels Michael Clayton's situation, which is that like everyone is kind of working for the same cause, but there's also like fractions within that cause of everyone kind of pointing fingers at each other. So they are there for the same purpose, but it's also, they're all there for their own purposes too. So it's kind of, that's why after he describes that, George Clooney goes, that sounds familiar. So I like how they set that up. And it's also just like some aspect of the book is there's like a vision quest that one of the characters has to go through in order to like get through the self-realization that is required to like unlock their full potential or whatever. Because it's like a fantasy kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not fantasy like in your head, but like,
like
the genre of the book is fantasy.
Yeah.
So it kind of ties together with that, and like the fact that both the book and the pamphlet unlock the truth, or like what helped Arthur specifically unlock the truth of this situation and like make it all make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that you have to even explain that, like, oh no, you don't understand. Like me and this main character in this book, we have the same situation. I'm not crazy. He has to like keep trying to point that out, but no one listens. That's why it's so frustrating. You want to be like, he's right. Just fucking listen to him.
Yeah.
Stop being a corporate stooge and fucking listen.
But it's also...
Because you're never going to solve anything.
It's mirrored really well with that book, because I was thinking the whole time, like, where I was like, there's obviously some sort of parallel because this is coming up, and now Henry's telling Arthur about the whole thing. And
you mean like in Annihilation when they cut to her in her college lecture class and she's like, so cancer, and then you're just like, oh, okay, so this is what the movie is about. Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not quite the same way, but I thought like, it's just it's fascinating that it's like, you're right. It's that, why is nobody listening when this guy is saying the things that need to be heard? And then it's like the book, Henry's trying to get his dad to read the book. And
he's just not interested.
He's just
like,
not
he's
interested
thinking
at
about
all.
a million other things. He's just like, yeah, sounds great.
Exactly. And so it's like,
and
they both have this parallel.
He's like, oh, well, give me a copy of the book. I'll read it. He's like, I already did.
Yeah, it's been sitting on your fucking kitchen table for months.
Sorry. I've been running errands for this evil corporation for the last 25 years or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about after the ending then. What do you think happens to the law firm, him, and, well, obviously the corporation has to... Like, the people in charge getting arrested, I would assume, would complicate things even further, because they pitch the settlement to their investors or whoever, and they all agree, but there's no paperwork signed. So that hasn't actually gone through. There's just been, they've come to that agreement that they're going to do that. Do they still do that? Does the case fall apart? Do they end up just losing the case? Does the memo leak? Or, I mean, like, I guess the police... would somehow know about that, and then they would try to maybe contact the prosecutors and be like, no, look, we had this evidence. This case is, you guys won. The corporation is fucked. Does the corporation implode then? Because they said it was like a $3 billion thing. Like, if they lost, they would have lost $3 billion in fees and restitution.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think you could go either way with it. I mean, I think it's obviously intentionally designed to let the viewer ponder on like what the aftermath might be, and I think it's like, me personally, I was like, I think that the ending was so satisfying that I want to believe that this is enough damning evidence to take down the corporation.
Right.
That's the happy ending in my mind.
I knew that was going to happen. The battery was not fully charged, so here we are
in the dark.
Now I'm slightly in the. Now actually, this would be better for me to do the bit. Yeah.
There you go.
There is a lot of diffusion and soft lighting in the. You know who what I like about this movie is that it's shot by Robert Elswit, who is a fantastic director of photography. He has shot so many great movies in the past. He shot Magnolia. He shot There Will Be Blood. He shot Michael Clayton. He shot other movies. I'm trying to pull up his IMDb. He shot Nightcrawler.
These are all really
Mission
good
Impossible
movies.
4 he shot.
I don't know that I'd be able to recall which one that is.
The Burj Khalifa one.
Oh, okay, that did look pretty good actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also shot Geely with Ben Affleck and Jennifer.
Okay.
But he shot Boogie Nights too. So he was like Paul Thomas Anderson's go-to guy.
More wins than losses. That's good.
Yeah.
But
and he's just he's always been really good. But then he also shot Skyscraper with Dwayne Johnson. So
well, I haven't seen
career
it.
Can,
Maybe
can
it's
have
really
peaks
good.
And valleys. This is actually bothering me that I looked back and I saw that it was still zoomed in. I was like, I need to go back to regular.
I like it. Go all the way in.
No, but the way he shoots it seems like if you didn't know better, you would think that the whole movie was in natural lighting. But he's just really good at making it look naturalistic without calling attention to it.
I think there's a bit of a blue tint though throughout the whole thing that kind of gives it a little bit of a sheen.
Just slightly. It's like slightly that and slightly undersaturated, but not like Clerks 2 undersaturated, where that was like the point. It's just enough to where it's closer to gray than it is.
Yeah, that's true.
Any sort of color. But that's what I like about it, is that like it makes everything look sort of so like sterile and cold, and it helps, it complements the tone of everything that's going on and the different elements of the story. So shout outs to Robert Elswit for knocking it out of the park again. Yeah. In fact, I think he was nominated twice in this. Oh no, it was that he couldn't do There Will Be Blood because he was doing this. Oh. So 2007 was such a great year for movies that There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men, and this were all nominated for Best Picture, as well as Juno and Atonement. And I've heard Atonement is good, and you know Juno is its own bag. Juno is Juno. Yeah. But you know what? Let's talk about this movie. Is barely dated. It is so slightly dated. And do you know what I'm going to say, Jordan?
Yeah, talk about all the cell phones.
No, not even the cell phones. The wireless landline phones that everyone's using.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember those?
Yeah, that's right.
We had them all for like a while.
Yep.
And then
it was
iPhones
hot shit.
Just became more ubiquitous and cheaper. And
see, Greg, I mean, the age gap between us, I think, I don't know if maybe like those portable like landline phones.
I grew up with them in the house. I enjoyed having them.
But were you there when they came out and you like noticed the difference between
when you went from having a coil to that?
See, I was around at that time, and that was like revolutionary. But
by the time that I was old enough to use a landline and know how to use it, they already had the wireless receivers. So like around 2002, 2003.
Well, I was there for both, and it was so funny because I remember like my mom was like, "We got the cordless phones." It was, oh my god, and they're like, you know, this big each. And
now you have these fucking boomers that are like, kids these days don't realize that you used to have the phone attached to the wall, and there was a cable that went from the phone to the receiver. I'm like,
but it's funny because there may as well have been a fucking cord, because you couldn't go very far away from the receiver with these things. Like you'd walk like 5 feet away, and it starts breaking up. Well,
you get one.
You get one in the other room. You're just like hopping from phone to phone throughout the rooms in your house.
No, I just mean Look, I don't know how it works, all right? As far as I know, it's magic. But it doesn't. Right. It's just not a thing anymore. Everyone got rid of their landlines when they just became essentially what mailboxes are, which is just an easy delivery system for junk. Just crap, just trash.
Yeah.
It's much like how the weed killer is a delivery system for cancer.
How many people these days, though, you know, that aren't like under the age of 60 are buying a landline? Like are paying for that
I would
shit?
Just assume businesses that
must be
want to have that and don't want to rely on like the limitations of a cell phone.
Like my parents still pay for like a landline service.
Well,
and I'm like,
I just assume that's everyone in Canada. No.
What? What do you mean?
I just assume that Canada is 20 years in the past of everyone. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that's an insane assumption and also incorrect. However, I think that the what it is it's old habits die hard, and I think that a lot of older people just feel like you have to have one in your house. Like I think my parents know as well as I do that if I call them on the fucking cell phone. Like
what
nobody
if the cell
is calling.
Reception goes down? How are you gonna call the ambulance?
In their with the cell reception would go down in their house with the landline.
Aren't the landlines like wired? Isn't that the whole point?
But I mean like
telephone.
So you're paying a monthly service subscription for a landline in the event that your cell service somehow stops in your own home.
Yes.
And you need to call the cops.
I don't know, dude.
I don't know either. I ask my parents and they don't even give me a good answer. I'm like, why are you paying for this? They're like, well, because it's, you know,
because if I stop paying for it, I had to pay more for DirecTV. That's
I think that was it. It's like it's part of the bundle or whatever. I'm like,
yeah, yeah. So that's that. But honestly, if they all had iPhones, this movie could easily take place in 2025, and nothing would be different.
Yeah.
With the technology that these hitmen or these these cronies have. I don't know. Maybe it's because they were hired by a giant conglomerate, or that it's like they're like specialists in that. But I was like, I'm sorry, but audio recordings of spyware in 2007 were not this crystal clear, guys. Like even bugging, like even the FBI doesn't get this clear of recordings when they tap phones today. Like, you know. But it's a movie. I get it. It's like the same reason why when there's found footage in a movie, they shoot it with the movie camera and not a handy cam, because it's going to look like shit.
Exactly.
And you actually want the audience to see what you're showing.
Yeah.
100%. Unless you're doing that as a gimmick. But
you got to give, some suspension of disbelief. But
I can't believe Cloverfield wasn't shot with a real handy cam.
Imagine the realistic version of Cloverfield. As soon as someone sees the monster, they just fucking throw the camera away. And that's the end of the movie.
It's 5 minutes. No, because that movie, that's like half an hour in. When they see the explosion,
so then right? it would be all the already archived, like on the camera.
Well, because they're running down the stairs after all the debris is flying towards the building,
right? Well,
and the camera cuts out. That's where the movie would have ended.
That's what it ended.
The camera cuts out. That's it.
That's it.
Credits roll. Stop filming.
What happened? There was a fucking giant monster. What?
It would be a great short film. Like, honestly, if you showed that, like, at a film festival, like, it's this whole character drama, and then there's a monster in the last 3 minutes, everyone would be like, what? This is the greatest thing ever. But no, there's another 50 minutes of Rob. Anyway, to get back to Michael Clayton, I mean, what more can you really say? It's just a solid thriller.
It is, yeah.
I'm surprised he had never seen it. It just seems like, but also, I'm not that surprised, because I hadn't seen it until Andor came out, and I was like, I need more Tony Gilroy.
Gilroy in your life.
And they're like, did you know he was once nominated for the biggest award you can win for a movie?
Well, it's funny, because I remember, like, when Michael Clayton came out, and it didn't appeal to me as a movie I wanted to see at the time. I think, it's funny, because there's a lot of movies, like, especially Oscar movies, and, I don't want to give the Academy too much credit for like picking movies that are actually entertaining, because I think it's all fucking
nowadays
circle jerk. But
occasionally they get it right.
Occasionally
like
there are some movies where you're like, okay, I totally thought this was going to be a slog, and it was really fucking engaging and great. And I think that was probably my apprehension to Michael Clayton my whole life leading up to till now. Because,
especially when you hear Tony Gilroy's elevator pitch, he's like, it's a movie about lawyers, but there's no courtroom scenes, and one person dies.
Yeah.
They're like, and you want $30 million for that?
Exactly.
It's not exactly.
It doesn't sound like it's going to be super entertaining, but it is. And I think, like I said before, I think it really comes down to really well crafting of the pacing of the story, and like, things that you are expecting to happen being somewhat subverted, but then also like knowing that shit's going to get fucked up as you see these kind of ulterior motives coming out left, right, and center. You're like, nothing's off the table. And I think that is really what makes it entertaining and engaging, because you're like, what the fuck is going to happen next? And then like, as soon as Arthur gets like fucking euthanized, you're like, okay, anything could fucking happen here.
Yeah, where is this going? Yeah. But of course, I do think that they obviously, you need an exciting start to your movie, because if you want people to keep watching it on the DVD they rented from Blockbuster, you gotta include an explosion in the first 5 minutes. It's not just George Clooney's not just enough to keep people interested in a movie like this. So I get why it's there, but at the same time, it kind of like softens any impact or tension I'm supposed to be feeling when they revisit it later. But we already know the car blows up and he survives.
But there's the revelation of the book, right? And the horses on the field with the. You know what's funny? Actually, that when George Clooney was looking at the horses, I was like,
"Are you thinking of the scene in 3 Billboards?"
No, I was thinking about the scene in Nope, where it starts off with.
And they take him to the movie
horse
set
trainer, on
the green screen.
He's like, "Don't look the horse in the eyes," right? And then it fucking kicks somebody off, like, And I was thinking, like, I wonder if they like told George Clooney, like, "Don't fucking look in these horses' eyes."
Are they ever in the same frame?
They are, and I noticed that as they're pulling back the camera, George Clooney is looking just off to the horse. And I was like, oh,
Right.
fuck, that probably is a real thing that you can't look it in the eyes.
Well, it's also, no, he's looking at the other horse, okay, that we can't see.
Well, there's 3 of them, and they're all
Exactly.
on that side, and he's looking that way.
Don't worry about it. It's just a movie.
I thought that was actually hilarious, though, because I was just like, oh, I was like, that's not something, you wouldn't know that. But I was like, that probably is a thing. So.
That was his vision quest. And then he was awoken seconds later. You know what, I actually, in that same scene, you know what's funny that I noticed, which maybe wouldn't have been noticeable on DVD, but, the car blows up, he throws all of his stuff in, and he runs up, like, the other side of the woods, like, into the actual tree part. And you can see this, like, this perfectly laid out little path that he runs along. I'm like, well, that's convenient that was there. I'm like, no, the crew put that there because he's fucking George Clooney, and they're not going to let him fall and, like, stab himself on a, piece of glass in the foliage or whatever. So very, very minor things you can pick apart with this movie. But I was getting back to that car chase, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Like, I like that they are continuing the aspect of just like showing that these are regular people doing a job and they're not infallible. But it's also like, we know the car is going to explode and he's going to live. And they disappear from the movie after that happens. So I'm like, I don't give a shit. They served their purpose in the movie. Like, I know he lives. Why do we care what they like? It the moment where they see the explosion over their shoulder is funny, but I didn't need the 5 minutes of build up to get to that gag. Like, you could have just cut to them really quick, and then because they're not in the rest of the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
But I get it. Like, you have that whole sequence with him coming out of the poker game and them like trying to put the bomb in his car, and like they don't finish the job, so the GPS screen's all fucked up. But he's too like in his own zone to even think about that. It actually kind of reminded me of the Truman Show at the beginning when the radio's going haywire.
Oh yeah,
and he's like banging on it. But
it's funny.
That's a
though,
movie we should talk about.
That's a good movie too. I like that one a lot. You just reminded me of with like having that sort of like obligatory like opening action scene in movies. The same shit happened in Sinners.
That's true.
And I was like, it was one of those things too, where it's like when the movie, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but in a very similar fashion, it was just like, was that necessary knowing now, what happens later? So it's like, but then I was like, I understand why.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing because, that Sinners, not to spoil it, but it does take its own time to get to that.
Exactly.
The action of the movie.
So it's like it has to let you know immediately, like, there's going to be some spooky stuff happening here.
Shit's going to go down.
Shit's going to go down. Exactly.
Stage setting first before we get to that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Before we go, I want to compare this to another political thriller that I saw recently. I mean, can you even call this political? Or is it just like a corporate thriller? There's not really any like...
I mean, it's not political in the sense of like world politics or anything, but I mean in terms of the policies that are implemented by huge corporations to... It's more of like a legal thriller, but also like a crime thriller in a way. I would say.
Yeah. A legal crime thriller.
But I mean, any of these labelings make it sound way more fucking boring than it is,
Right.
So
I mean, on paper, it is a very boring idea for a movie, but in execution, it's one of the most enthralling things you'll ever watch. Yeah. So another one I watched like it was Michael Mann's movie The Insider with Russell Crowe and Al Pacino. And we were talking about how like methodical the pacing is in this movie. Like no real screen time is wasted. Even when you think they're wasting time, it ends up paying off later in the movie. The Insider is not so much the case because I feel like Michael Mann has a little bit of an issue with like that and Heat, where there's a lot of like wheels spinning, and they just have like they do like a thing where like in the middle of the movie they do the same scene like 6 times in a row. Like Al Pacino goes over to Russell Crowe's house. Russell Crowe is upset at Al Pacino because of what 60 Minutes is doing. And then Al Pacino calms him down and says, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." And then something else happens, a button therefore script moment relationship happens, and then, just recycle the same scene but with new dialogue. And this movie didn't feel like that. So I really appreciated that. Also, The Insider is 2.5 hours. This movie is 2 hours. It does not waste any time. The Insider, you could have easily trimmed 20 minutes out of because the whole thing is just leading up to whether or not 60 Minutes will air an interview. That's a lot different than, like everything that happens in Michael Clayton. It's a lot lower of stakes. Like, yes, it is high stakes because they're revealing all of this stuff about Philip Morris that they don't want to release to the public, and they have their own goons that they hire to try to follow and intimidate Russell Crowe in that movie. You know, if you think about it, the insider is like the real version of what he's imagining in A Beautiful Mind. In a way.
They're connected. Direct companion.
He's almost like the Arthur character from Michael Clayton in that movie.
That's true.
Except he is actually crazy I mean, they're both actually crazy, but one is correct and the other is suffering under delusions.
That's right.
It was nice to rewatch this and be like, yes, this is how you're supposed to do it. You're not just supposed to, like, I enjoy Heat and The Insider and Collateral. Those are the Michael Mann movies I've seen. I'm sure he's made others that are really good. I don't know, just something about, like, I think, you know, this idea isn't, like, original. It is kind of ripped from the headlines, but it's original enough to where it sets itself apart from, like, based on a true story. It's like, yeah, kind of, but also no one's car blew up.
Yeah.
Like, yes, cars did blow up, but
literally
not
blew up, but not like that.
You know, I'm not doing a great job of this whole thing, but you get what I'm trying to say.
I get what you're trying to say.
It's obviously a different sensibilities that the directors have, and
it's a unique approach.
What Tony Gilroy pulled off appealed more to me, just overall.
No,
and you know what I love about the casting is that, like, the movie goes out of its way to be like, man, this guy's a fucking loser. He's divorced. His business fell through. He's broke. He's middle-aged. He's a janitor at this law firm where he could be in trials making all this money. But you're like, yeah, but he's George Clooney. He can't be a loser. He's George Clooney, you know? Yeah. Which is, you know what's interesting? They actually cut out a whole girlfriend subplot from this movie.
Oh, really?
To give him even more dimension, he had a girlfriend. But I'm like, I can see why it wouldn't make it, because it didn't really further the plot at all.
I'm glad that they did. I'm glad they cut that.
I mean, I understand why you want to, if you call a movie based off the main character, you kind of want to explore every aspect of their life day to day. But that just, it seemed superfluous. It's like, you got the ex-wife and the kid. You don't need to complicate it, because it's also like,
but also his
connection does she have to anything that's happening? Like, at least
and his
when he's there at his son's birthday party or whatever, or I guess it's his father-in-law's birthday party.
But his estrangement comes from, you know, his line of work and everything like that. So it's to add a girlfriend into the mix. It's like that kind of.
It contradicts what they're trying to say with, like, he doesn't have time for even that. It's like, well, then how does he have time for her?
Yeah, exactly.
He can't even stay around he can't even listen to his son for like 5 minutes in the car driving him to school.
No, I'm glad that they didn't include that. That would have undone what they set up for his actual character. Well,
I also like that his son doesn't think he's a loser. His son likes him as his dad. In fact, they portray his ex-wife's current husband as just sort of like a geek, like a square. Yeah. And so, you know, obviously Henry has more of a connection to his real dad. But then it's also like there's never a point where he has to come to terms with the fact that his dad isn't, you know, or his dad never, you know, goes to him and he's like, do you think I'm a good person? Like, they don't, we don't need that. But then it's also like they don't have to demonstrate that because they have the fuck up uncle brother character. Who, like, they even have that little interaction where he's like, is he crying because he's on drugs? He's like, that and everything else. So, you know, he already has someone he can look to as, like, a negative example of how to be. But it's also like, you want to look up to your dad, but if your dad is also kind of a loser, played by the most handsome man in the world, you know, you just kind of, it's just kind of normal to you. Like, for all he knows, his dad is just a normal guy with a normal office job who's not dealing with all this stuff. So, all this to say that it is very appropriately grounded in every aspect. There's no aspect of this movie where you feel like it's out of the realm of possibility. Like, when it comes to hitmen specifically, I think people call it a myth because they're assuming that, like, if you or I tried to hire a hitman, it would obviously just be a cop posing as a hitman.
Right.
But when you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation,
you can actually make it happen,
Yeah, like, that does exist in the world. It's just not an average Joe kind of thing like Barry, you know?
Yeah.
So it actually made me want to go down the DuPont rabbit hole to, like, learn
all about that. I thought
you
were about to say it actually made you want to become a hitman.
It made me want to become a janitor for a law firm. It made me want to spend $80,000 of money I didn't have on a restaurant that failed. Because my
and that's what everybody leaves this movie thinking. That's the Michael Clayton effect.
That's the lesson you learn. Get into the restaurant business. There's no way it'll go wrong. Your life will go perfectly smooth.
Exactly. Always have a
but
cell
I also
phone
like
recording
that he's
in your pocket.
he's only really dealing with like this stuff in the day to day because it only really takes place over like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah,
I like that everything else is just like established. It's already happened. Here's where he is now, and here's what he's gonna have to do in this most significant moment of his life. But then it's also like the whole plot. We didn't mention this. He borrows $80,000 from his boss at this law firm who is representing the evil company, and they basically call it like a bonus, but they make him sign a confidentiality agreement, and so they use that as leverage against him to be like, or it's not even that, like, I don't know if Marty, Sidney Pollack's character, has any idea that Tilda Swinton hired those guys to kill Arthur. I don't know if he's tuned into that at all. I think he's completely out of the loop, but it's also not out of the realm of possibility that he would know, you know? So he gets the $80K to pay off the restaurant debt. And then they essentially use that as like a way to be like, okay, he's going to keep his mouth shut. We can go ahead and kill Arthur all we want. But then it becomes pretty quickly apparent that he's not just going to roll over and take it. He's going to be like, no, something's fucked up. I'm going to continue what he was onto because obviously he was onto something. And whether or not it compromises my career, and because he has like, what, a 3-year contract still signed with the company. So the final scene happens. He confronts Tilda Swinton, and then he goes and he gets in a cab. He just hands the guy like a $50 bill and tells him to drive or whatever. And it lingers on his face as the credits roll in the lower third. And you just watch his face kind of go from like, you watch him sort of like wind down from that place he got to like confront her like that. And then you watch him just like kind of like go through the events of the last few days on his face. And there's like a few moments where you watch him just go like, well, at least I paid off the fucking debt. I don't have to deal with that shit anymore. And he's like, yeah, but at what cost? Fucking Arthur's dead. Like, all this shit imploded. My law firm's probably going away. I'm going to have to find a new job. Like, you know, he has all these mixed emotions, but ultimately you get the conclusion that he knows that he did the right thing, no matter what it actually ended up costing him or the people around him. And that is probably the one aspect of this movie that is unrealistic, that someone actually won against a corporation and did the right thing. I mean, obviously whistleblowers exist like Arthur was trying to be, but they usually end up like Arthur, dead under mysterious circumstances. Wow, all those people that knew everything about Boeing, they just killed themselves before they could, or they got in a car accident that, under mysterious circumstances. That's crazy. Wow, all these victims of Kevin Smith.
That's a lot of victims. That's all the people that watched Yoga Hosers.
Oh, God. Oh, God. No, all these victims of Kevin Spacey, they all killed themselves. That's crazy. I can't believe that happened. There must be no coincidence between that and his fucking role in House of Cards where he was doing exactly that and getting away with it. So, yeah, I mean, it is a nice happy ending for this movie, but in real life, it's like, I think the car bomb would have gone off and Michael Clayton would be fucking smithereens and and they would have gotten away with it and settled the case and all that. And
none
of those people who lost their relatives to the cancer that these pesticides created.
Well, I mean, having
gotten justice.
Michael Clayton step out of the car because he sees a scene that was in the fantasy book that his child was reading. I mean, that in itself is that Deus Machina? I mean, like, there's no fucking
Deus.
Way. Is it Deus?
Deus Ex Machina.
I think you're pronouncing it.
It would only be do if it was an X. Deus.
Is it
Deus like is the Latin word for like God or omnipotent force.
Let's fact check that.
I don't have to. There's a video game called Deus Ex Machina, Jordan.
No, that one's called Douche Ex Machina.
No, that's your autobiography.
Oh no. For the kind of movie that it is and that you might expect, it is really entertaining, really engaging, unexpectedly so, you know?
Yeah. It's a nice little like, oh, you know, like it's nice to know that movies like this exist.
One thing I will say though, maybe on like a bit of a negative side, is that it does feel a little bit like a one and done for me. Like, I don't know if I'll be like in a rush to rewatch it. Like, it's not something I'll be like once a year I'll put on Michael Clayton. Like,
that's fair.
I acknowledge that it's a good movie, but
That actually ended up lining up. Like, I checked it out when season 1 of Andor ended because I wanted more Tony Gilroy peak. I watched it then, and then that was 3 years ago. And now Andor season 2 is airing, and I rewatched this now. So I had 3 years between, and I remember being like, oh, that was a really good movie. I would enjoy watching that again. Even if I know where it's going, I feel like you can still really get into the plot. And I feel like this time I actually understood what the hell was going on with the restaurant subplot.
Right.
Because the first time around, I was so focused on the corporation side of it that I was like, wait, what? Your brother, ex-brother? And it doesn't help that, like, all of his relatives look like the same type of white guy.
Yeah, that's true.
So you're like, wait, he has a brother and a brother-in-law, and they're two different people. One's a cop, one's not. I didn't know that the cop was his brother anyway, because they never really say it out loud.
Yeah.
So you just kind of assume. You know what I like is the fact that the detective, who is like the one who investigated Arthur's death scene, tells him you can't go in the building. It's all sealed off. Like, you know, don't get any more involved. And then he immediately turns around and does that. And then as his brother is like helping him bail, like getting him bailed out of jail, you see the other detective that would just told him that in the background. He doesn't even say anything. He just looks at him. He's like, and he walks away.
Yeah, that's great. That's so good.
It's nice that like the one time that he starts like going against the grain is when everything starts like acting against him. Like the second he stops going along with it, he figures out just because you know what you're talking, like he finds himself in the same boat as Arthur, where he's like, even if you know you're in the right and you know you have something that needs to be said and heard for the greater good of, you know, society at large, doesn't mean anyone really wants to listen because they got their own shit to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's the movie, you know.
Yeah,
Tilda Swinton, Tom Wilkinson, George Clooney,
Sidney Pollack.
Sidney Pollack. All great performances. Yeah. Michael Clayton.
Michael Clayton.
Good job.
Check it out.
5 stars. Put it on my top 4 on Letterboxd. I'll give it the little heart. I'll tap the heart. I'll tap the rewatch symbol. I'll write some half snarky comment about the movie instead of a real review. And then everyone will see it and they'll think, wow, that guy's so cool because he posted on Letterboxd. Because really that's what's important about movies. It's not just about experiencing it yourself. It's knowing that everyone else had the same experience as you. And if they didn't, then they're a piece of shit who doesn't deserve to watch movies. So if you liked Michael Clayton, but your friend didn't, ultimately you are correct because you are the main character of reality. That's how it works.
You're the Michael Clayton of your own life.
Exactly. We are all our own Michael Claytons, and we're just trying to get by, you know? And the world, life is unfair. You're not the boss of me now.
Don't be a hater, be a Clayter.
What?